with questions from the panelists.
I have one.
Nancy Rabelais.
From the number of examples that you gave of management mechanisms working, I'm still not convinced there's not a water crisis, because I see too many more situations of corruption and mismanagement and greed that have not been turned around. So I'm not so sure that there is not a water crisis given human behavior right now in this world.
Let me answer that straight away. I said there will be no water crisis because of physical shortage of water.
Yep.
If there will be a crisis, it is because how we are managing it. But one positive thing I can speak from in some of the developing countries, and remember, let me not speak about the developing countries. I only work in the 18 countries, and I do not work in the 90% of the rest of the countries of the world. So my knowledge is based working in these 18 countries. In the 18 countries I'm working on, water is becoming an increasingly important issue in the political agenda, as a result of which the corruption issues, what was there before, is much less. In Phnom Penh, if you would have told me even 2000, there will be no corruption in one institution in Phnom Penh, absolute no corruption, I would have said you are crazy. But right now, there is an institution, there's absolutely no corruption, whereas corruption is rampant in the other public sector company. So it's a question of management, it's a question of incentives and disincentives, how you do it. So even, as I said, in the Transparency International's bottom of the league country, you could have the only non-corrupt public sector institution in the country. So it can be done.
I agree it can be done. I'm worried that it might not be done.
I would disagree with you respectfully, saying it's a question of time. People are becoming more aware. People are becoming the cost of corruption. I cannot speak for the United States. You are an expert on that. I don't work in the US. But in a context of the Western Europe and much of the developing world, again, I can't speak much of Africa because most of Africa is alien to me. I don't work in there. But what I see in other parts of the world I work in, I see signs of hope. This is why I said I'm cautiously optimistic that there will be no water crisis.
Thank you. Who wants to go next?
I'll go next.
David Sedlak.
I really appreciated your kind of on-the-ground understanding of water management and some of the problems in managing these complex systems. And I appreciate also that you have good interactions with private companies. So I'm kind of curious if you could share with us your perspective on the role of private companies in solving some of these urban water problems.
It's the private companies are, of course, profit-oriented. There's nothing wrong with that. But because of financial pressure, political pressure, and what is important, water pricing, the price of water is being increased in many, many places. They have become increasingly conscious of the importance of water and the role it plays in their manufacturing process. And by changing their manufacturing process, for example, Peter Brabeck now, whenever he visits any of the Nestle companies anywhere in the world, he asks three questions. He told me he asked 3 questions. What is your water use per dollar of sale? What is your carbon footprint? What is the profit and loss account? That's all, 3 questions. So when you see the chairman of the board so interested, you see results. Coca-Cola, we are seeing the same results. So some of the large Indian industries like Reliance, one of the one of the largest conglomerate and Fortune 500 company, or Fortune 100 company, I would say, the head of those companies have become interested in water. So wherever there is an interest from the top, it's happening, but not as an industry as a whole.
I think my question was more about the private companies as being part of the water supply solution and not necessarily cutting their demand.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood you. My view there is very clear. One of the persons from whom I learned a lot is China's Deng Xiaoping. And I remember a conversations I had with him in 1980. A very kind man, very intelligent man. He looked at me and said, "Professor, you are a very good academic, but you have to learn the facts of life." And I asked him, "What do you mean by facts of life?" And he said, "Professor, as far as I'm concerned, I don't care whether a cat is black or white or gray. Only question I want to know, can the cat catch the mice?" And that has been my philosophy. And in my view, I don't care whether it's the public sector, private sector. It is, to me, it's a red herring. It's not an issue. If the public sector can provide water or the private sector can provide water to everyone at a reasonable price, at a reasonable price, which people can afford, I don't care where the water comes from. That is my personal view.
Do you want to go?
Okay.
Dr. Graff.
Here in southern Minnesota, we're on the edge of an interesting population change that's going on in middle America. There's a major shift of the population from rural to urban, and there is a growth of mid-sized and larger cities that results from this migration. Most of our discussions today have been about places where the population has been increasing. But I'm curious to know, first of all, in your experience, are there other places like the Northern Plains in America where population is decreasing? And if so, what does that have to do with impacts on water availability and quality?
That's a very good question, because many parts of the Western Europe facing exactly the same problem. I currently advise the president of the state of Aragon in Spain, and there the biggest problem is the same, the population, in fact, hollowing out a population in the interior, and they're moving to some urban centers, as a result of which in the interior becoming less and less. It's a self-feeding process. And what they have done there is quite interesting. Through legal framework and through public-private partnership, they have developed a scheme as a result of which you can supply water supply and wastewater treatment to areas up to now 1,000 population or more. So by 2010, all the areas with 1,000 population or more will have water supply and wastewater treatment, and the next step will be to go to the below one. But that is a big problem, because they are scratching their head, not only water, but how do we provide all types of services to this declining population, which is self-feeding. If the school disappears, the young people don't stay there. So it's a really serious question, and I don't have an answer to that.
More questions from the panel?
Well, I have a question that I know where it starts. I just don't know where it ends. So you may need to cut me off.
I'll look at my watch.
Yeah. First of all, I want to say thank you very much. You said that your knowledge base was enhanced by this conference. You got me thinking, because of your remark, by challenging some myths that I was inclined to sign on to. So thank you for that. I have some kind of fundamental disagreement, and I can't put my finger right on it. I think it may be on assumptions about the nature of human nature, and whether your confidence in enlightened management and kind of in a rational world is really borne up even by your own examples. Because, well, first of all, I don't subscribe to the Greek notion that if people know what they ought to do, they will necessarily do it. That kind of, which was repeated in the Enlightenment, out of which modern science grew. I think we're a pretty bratty species. And the best we can do is align our self-interests, collective interests, which aren't global, with other interests and get enlightened self-interest. But I think your own political examples of Singapore and Phnom Penh, it doesn't come out of a kind of confidence of an enlightened population in a rational world. It came out of threats. Experience of Japanese bombing. The Malaysians might cut off our water. That's Singapore. Or in Cambodia, the media is standing and confronting the general, you know, when the water person comes out. It's still a pretty bratty species that's doing this. So not being able to quite name my, what I think is a disagreement with you on human nature, I'm going to go to the question I have. And the question I have is a quite different one. Is cheap or subsidized water itself the problem? If you make water free or nearly free, do you wring out the inefficiencies that we presently have? Yet water is utterly essential to everybody, so what about the poor who can't afford cheap water?
Now, I cannot speak for the poor in the United States because I have no knowledge of how water is priced to the poor people here. What I can tell you, it's a myth, and a big myth, that the poor in the developing countries are not willing to pay for water. It's perpetuated by some Western people who go to these places for 1 week, stay in 5-star hotels, yeah, and decide the poor can't pay. And by some NGOs with vested interest in the countries. Let me give you examples. And these are, I can give you from any parts of Asia to Mexico to anywhere. In Phnom Penh, when water was supplied to the poor, and we did actually go to the poor families in the worst slums of Phnom Penh, and we asked them, are you prepared to pay? Or are you happy to pay? The answer flummoxed me, completely flummoxed me. I didn't expect at all. And let me share the answer. The general answer was, sir, I thought you were an intelligent man. Why are you asking such a stupid question? And I said, what do you mean a stupid question? He said, sir, before I used to buy water from the private vendor because you have to have water to survive. It's a myth now to say that people don't have access to water. If you don't have access to water, you've been dead long time ago. So everyone has access to water. It's the quality of water and reliability of supply. So he says, why are you asking me now? I have a connection to my house. I get 24-hour water supply. My wife or I do not have to go and look for the water vendor who will come at a certain time and give water of indifferent quality. Now I get a water good quality. On top of that, my water bill has been cut by 80% to what I was paying to the vendor. So why are you asking I'm not willing to pay this 20% of what I was paying before for a 24-hour supply and to my house? We have the same experience in Mexico, same experience in Philippines, exactly the same. The poor are willing to pay for water if it is priced properly and if it is handled properly. There's no problem at all. And one supplemental question we asked, whereas from the poor in Phnom Penh, I did not receive any complaint except saying, excellent system, even if they are charged a little bit more, we're happy to pay. It's the rich and the middle class that are complaining the water prices are too high, can you reduce it?
Very good.
Okay, this is a question that's really addressed to the whole panel and kind of ties in some of the themes of the both days. The question writer writes, I represent the first year of the baby boom generation. Several speakers have emphasized today's kids as the ones who will fix this mess. Does this mean my generation, the baby boom, has gotten a free pass or just been written off?
Well, absolutely not.
No
We're-
free
we're-
passes.
Yeah, there's no free passes. I think everybody here that is the parents of a baby boomer or a baby boomer know that they've been working on this issue for a long time, and we just aren't passing it off. Hopefully we're giving some skills and some ideas to the next generation so that they can make wise decisions.
I actually want to
Yeah.
try at that. I guess I want to mention that I didn't write off the baby boom in my talk. And I also wanted to mention that, in the past few years, I've noticed that there's been a changing of the guard, and the people who often make the big decisions are between the age of 50 and 65, and I think that's the baby boom. And so now it's time for the baby boom to step up and enable the change that we're all expecting. And it's the generation after that will be able to implement what the baby boom does. So, it's not over.
Yeah, I'm not finished.